Hi everyone, it's Professor Chew. Welcome to the third week of medical terminology. And in this video, I'm going to first talk a little bit about Canvas, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about the homework from the first two lessons actually, and some common questions or unclarities or concerns that I've noticed in going over your homework, and then about some new material for lessons 3 and 4 for our homework for week 3, and also go over the word derivation questions. And by the way, this video is a live stream, so in the future, I'm going to let you know when I do these in case you'd like to be online when I'm doing them. At the moment, I tend to take my videos at kind of odd hours. It's actually kind of late at night here on Sunday. It's probably very early morning where you are on the East Coast, but some students found that helpful last year. And one thing I'd like to do, though it's been a little bit hard to figure out how to schedule this, is to have kind of a live hour when I could be online and you could ask me questions. But, well, we'll get around to that. First, though, I wanted to look at Canvas because I know that I think pretty much all of you are new to it, and I know it's not as natural for you to use right now as Sakai, so I really appreciate your patience with it. I did want to say that Canvas is, just in my looking around the web, seems to be used a little bit more frequently by other universities, and in particular by some large universities, like some of the Ivies, Harvard, Yale, etc. It's used by UC Berkeley out here, used by Stanford, which is not the reason for using it, but I think, or Penn State. But I think the reason a lot of these schools have started to use Canvas is it does have some features that are pretty useful for an online class. From my end, it makes it a little bit easier for me to track your work and to grade. So that makes a difference for me. I have to tell you that right now our class, our medical terminology class, has over 200 people enrolled in it, which is exciting. I have been teaching this class. This is my 6th time. This is the biggest class ever. It's great. I'm thrilled so many people want to take this class. And that, we raised the cap of the class so more people could take it too, which is also, I think I'm really glad to be able to do. What that means for you is that I have sought for ways to make the grading, to speed up the grading, and in other words, to make a lot more of it automatic. Since it takes me a little bit more time to go through everybody's homework and also quizzes and everything and discussion posts. I don't have a TA for this class. I will have graders for the midterm and the final. Grad students in the classics department. But for a lot of reasons, Canvas is actually easier for me to use to do some of those things. So it has, I think, made it possible to increase the enrollment of this class. So about the Canvas website. So this is our welcome page. I want you to direct you to announcements. Whenever I send out a big group email to the class, that email is actually also posted under announcements. So I typically will send you an email at the start of the week telling you the assignments and what's going on this week. And then I have been known to send out other messages. I try not to send too many, but last week I sent out quite a few, I'm afraid. But if you miss those, or if they're going, if they're not going to an email address that you check frequently, you can access these announcements just by going to this announcements tab. Syllabus is the syllabus. The main thing for you to check, of course, is the modules tab. That has a schedule really for the entire class. You don't have, you do have this, sorry. You should have, this entire list of all of the work. It goes down to the final exam, actually. And notice that, yes, I don't usually post the homework till about a week before it's going to be due. I kind of want you to finish the assignment for the week. And also the discussion posts and the quiz, I wait on that till a little later in the week, but they will appear, so do not fear. And I will, as we move after the midterm especially, I will be posting a lot of the homework assignments early so you can get to work on them. But for right now, I think kind of sticking to the schedule of the week by week is good, so you can get a really firm foundation of the material. I know that there were a lot of questions about the discussion last week, so I do want you to know that when you have a discussion, just by going to the discussion link, that should lead you to where to go for your discussion post. Now, I've divided everybody into groups, which was kind of a problem the past week because a lot of people enrolled in the class last week and messed up the groups that I had created, which is okay. That actually happens every year on Sakai too. So if you weren't assigned to a group, You were supposed to post here. If you didn't post at all because you had no idea where to post, contact me immediately, or if you find you don't have a grade or a 0 for this assignment, that is because you probably weren't sure where to post. So let me know. I understand this is a new system for everyone, and we're trying to work out all of the so-called kinks. You should be assigned to a group for your discussion, and you can't see the other people's responses until you write your own post. That's the way it's set up. So if you don't see anything else written there, it's because you haven't posted yet. Okay, now having created this beautiful system, I'm afraid I'm going to kind of mess things up for week 3. So we got the usual lecture here, which I'm making right now, the readings. I wanted to warn you too that even though I do have the PDFs posted for the readings for lessons 3 and 4, we have 2 lessons this week, so the homework is a little bit longer, not terribly longer, but a little bit longer. I'm not going to be posting the PDF after this week of the lessons because you really need to get the textbook. So, well, if you started the class late and, last year the bookstore ran out of the book. So if you haven't been able to get your copy yet and you're having kind of an emergency about that because you really do need the book to do the homework, as I think you've discovered, let me know. But keep in mind that I am not posting the PDFs forever. There's always lecture notes, which I do encourage you to look at. Of course, there's your homework assignment, which I think we've gotten used to doing. And okay, so things a little bit different about this week's homework assignment, and I hope to keep this the same from now on. And I apologize for throwing yet another complication at you. But I'm getting a sense too of how to make Canvas a little bit more workable. So I have now divided the homework lesson into 2 parts. The first part is the usual part where you are breaking down words and doing the word derivation exercises and looking in exercise 3 to find a medical term that fits with a given definition. However, the section where you're supposed to write out the definitions for about 25 to 30 words, there's a few more in this homework, is now in a whole separate link, which is here. Okay, so this is the main part of the homework, and this is the definitions part. And please enter your definitions here. When you submit it, you should, I believe, get graded automatically on this and get your points. I will add the points together for your total score. So don't worry about that, how it's going to show up on your grade. But I'm hoping that by doing it this way, it'll make it a little bit faster for me to get you your grades on this part of the homework, and everyone can be happier, hopefully. We'll see what that means. So bear with me. This will be to your benefit. I'm not saying that medical terminology needs to be any bigger than it is, but we'll see how many students, always more the merrier in this class. So who knows, if we make this class so much efficient on Canvas, thanks to your comments and feedback and work, who knows what'll happen in the fall. With that said, I know a couple of you have asked about scheduling the midterm. So yes, if you want to look ahead, there is a link here, preparing for the midterm, which gives you more information about it. I'm not going to talk about it tonight, but you're certainly welcome to read this, and I will talk about it more as, next week. But I will be sending out a link actually either at the end of this week or early next week. And by the way, we do have a calendar function here, which, the due dates and everything should show up for you for medical terminology here. So if you're not sure when something is due, it's actually listed here on the calendar. If you haven't checked that, and it scrolls down so you can see the entire, a couple weeks. And then there's a box here that means something is due. Basically, things, as you know, are due here on Friday and Sunday. Anyways, I'll be sending out a survey to ask you when you can take the midterm. And what I usually do is I offer, in the past it's been 2 to 3, but I think it's definitely going to be at least 3 different times and dates for you to take the midterm. It is on the College Avenue campus in New Brunswick. And it'll be proctored by me in some of the sessions and by some grad students in classics. And it will be the last week of February, those very first days of March, like February 27th to like March the 3rd or something. There will definitely be an exam offered on a Saturday. I won't be proctoring that one because I'll be back here with my son. But anyways, I hope to meet a lot of you during the midterm. And if not, I'll hopefully meet you during the final. But that's coming up and I'll let you know about it. So getting on to the homework assignment. So I am going to post for you this wonderful document. If we can pull it up here. Can't pull it up here. Hang on. It is actually an answer key to the homework assignment. And well, what it's going to do is actually, sometimes old technologies work better than new ones. One learns when one is using a lot of tech. And so what I have here is actually, whenever it opens up, is a document that goes over the homework for you. And yes, I use a lot of Google Docs. I find them very useful. If you don't use Google Docs, I'm not trying to promote anything, but I kind of recommend that. It's another story you can bring up with me. But anyway, so I'm posting this key to the answers. Now, not everybody has done lesson 2. I know because a lot of you enroll late or still catching up with the class. So I'm posting it for the class. You're on your honor. You know, you really shouldn't look at it until you have done both lessons. But anyways, I really wanted to make sure those of you who started the class have a good explanation for why you had some errors on your homework. Once again, I don't give you full credit. I give you 0.9 often if you spell something wrong. So please take note of how to spell things. Spelling does count. Sometimes a letter or two can mean you have a different word or a slightly different meaning. I think you've been noticing that. So something to note in lesson 1 that was a big thing was that some of the bases, like this one for bone, ost and oste, actually, since it starts with an O, it can be mistaken for a connecting vowel when it's not. So I put together some of the words from lesson 1 and also tried to point out some reasons for their suffixes, etc. By the way, a lot of you have, which I really appreciate, been very diligent about, you know, putting vowels in parentheses and, you know, noting when, you know, there might be an extra vowel here from a prefix, etc. You really don't necessarily need to do that. You can just actually take the word that you're given and break it down into parts. You know, for instance, there actually is an extra E in this ost, but it's not in the medical term, so there's no reason to add it necessarily when you are putting in your answers in Canvas. If you do that, I'm trying to program Canvas so it'll still mark you correct, but you don't need to do that. You can just, you know, when you put the parts of the word into the boxes, you can just put the part that is in the medical term that you are given. If that didn't make any sense at all, contact me. I'll try to explain. So these are some things that actually, some of the things I talk about here are things that would probably make sense if I was just talking to you face to face, but so it goes. One word I wanted to point out, so these words use ost, the base or combining form that means bone, but notice that sometimes you can have that O can be followed by an S and T, but it's not the form ost. It's actually, O in some cases can be a connecting vowel in front of a term, a base that starts with an ST, like sten, which means a narrowing, or stom, which means an opening. So a word that a few people had trouble with in lesson 1 was colostomy. It is not col-ost. And then what do you do with this part? Like broken down like this over here. It's crossed out. It is colostomy. How do you know which one it is? Well, one reason is that there's no suffix my. So that's one reason you need to get good track of these suffixes and prefixes, I think, and look at the bases really carefully, or have that part of your book open while you're doing the homework. You know, don't just look at the words to break them down. That doesn't work. You're not breaking these words down into syllables. You're breaking them down into the parts that they have from the Greek or Latin later elements that they are from. So you're not breaking words down into syllables. If you're doing that, you will not do so well in this class. And hopefully, well, I'll keep saying that. Another word, nephrocyst anastomosis. Probably totally mispronouncing that, but this is how this very long word breaks down. It has something to do with kidneys, connecting vowel, assist, ana meaning up against, stom meaning an opening, and a disease condition. So by breaking this long word into parts, you can see that it has all of those components, and it has this base stom in the middle, which means an opening. Be very careful again with bases that begin with a vowel, because they can kind of they're one of the reasons that some of you are making some errors. For instance, acanthosis, condition of having spiny cells. For example, this word parenchyma is actually on lesson 2, and a couple people got it wrong because they broke it down, putting the breaking it up here. Now, it is true, there is a prefix para, but when para is put in front of a base starting with a vowel, you use the other form of para, which has exactly the same meaning of beside or next to, par. And so it becomes instead par acanthoma. Why is that correct? Why is it not correct to put the slash here? Because there is no base that is that. It was no base canth. So in other words, when you're breaking down the words, you not only need to find the prefix, you need to see if there is a base, if what you're left over with is a base. I mean, one way to look at what we're doing in the word analysis questions is it's like you have a puzzle and you need to figure out, you know, what are the pieces in it? Maybe that doesn't quite make sense. But you already have the puzzle put together, and you need to figure out, you know, what are the pieces of the puzzle. There, I think that made a little bit more sense. Here we have this word diencephalon. Notice that quite a few people marked it as encephal. And it's not that surprising. Cephal is a base on its own that means head. But generally, when you have encephal in a word, it is the word that means a brain. And if you're really stuck on how to break down a word, I recommend that you get out a medical dictionary and look the word up. Because often when you look up the word, it makes it very clear. It defines something as being about the brain or the head, for instance. In that case, looking at the word is a way to help you. It's not cheating. I think it can actually guide you to the correct meaning. Again, note that this base that means blood has 3 different forms: hem, hemat, and m. You do not need to indicate the h if there's a word that has m, like anemic. But you need to break down. Notice that this is the base, this is the prefix, this is the suffix. A couple people have been leaving EMIA without breaking it down as if it was a suffix. It is not a suffix. The only suffixes we know are the ones listed right now in lessons 1 and lessons 2. If you find a suffix that's not on that list, it's because it's not a suffix. So, in fact, EM and IA, this combination is a pretty common combination of a suffix with a base. So keep that in mind. Bases can actually be very short, like EM. So some other examples here. And then, we'll just move on to talking about word derivation because it's here on this homework assignment. One thing that I noted in a couple of your answers, or why you've gotten sometimes a half of a point, is because you have most of the word but not the whole thing. So in some cases, you may have left out a word like around, inflammation of the tissues around a blood vessel. Well, if you put angitis, that simply means inflammation of a blood vessel. The peri, meaning around, tells us that it means around a blood vessel. And do notice that this peri, meaning around, P-E-R-I, does look a lot like, it's not very different from P-A-R-A that we had over here for parenchyma, but they're very different words. It may not seem like a big deal to have P-A-R-A versus P-E-R-I, but they have very different meanings in Greek. So again, one of the difficult things about this class is that Greek is not, it does not have much of a relationship to English. It gives English a lot of words, but it sounds totally different from English. So a word may sound like something to you in English, but it very likely doesn't mean that because Greek really is a very foreign language. And membrane around the heart, pericardium. So the eum indicates it's a membrane, cardi indicates it's about the heart, peri is around. Osteologist, this means a specialist, indicated by this ist in the study lobe of bones. So if you put, for instance, osteology, I only gave you half a point because putting the ist at the end tells me that it's a person who specializes in doing this, and that is important to note. So sometimes you might have the entire term right, but you have the wrong suffix. You know, when you look at the corrections, take a look at the suffix to see why you may have gotten something wrong. So there are a couple other corrections here that you can note. I will try to put up this kind of correction. I mean, it's a little tricky for me to put the corrections right now just because not everybody's actually done with the homework at the same time, which is nobody's fault because I know, again, some of you did sign up for their class late, so you have a lot to catch up on. Okay, but if you really want, but also, as you know, if you really need an explanation about a homework problem, please contact me and I'm glad to give it to you. And a couple people got this one incorrect. It was a blood vessel's innermost lining. The answer is endometrium. The eum indicates that it's some kind of layer or membrane, and the on indicates that it's a blood vessel, and then the n indicates that it is within. A lot of you put this word down, tunica intima. You often got to have credit for that because it is partially correct, but this term endometrium is actually listed in exercise 3 of lesson 1. So even the answers for that part of the homework are all actually in exercise 3. A couple people had questions about this poor word, endostoma. Okay, so this word it is broken down like this, endostoma. It has the base ost, the prefix end, and the suffix oma. And it refers to an osseous or bony ost, tumor, oma, that appears within a bone. Now, it does look like you can break down the word here if the O is a connecting vowel, and then that it uses stome, the base meaning mouth. And that is a possible breakdown, but it's not correct. If you, the way to figure that out is if you think that a word can be broken down in more than one way, go look it up in the dictionary. When you see generally anything that has the part of the word bone in its definition is probably using some form of ost. So you need to use that too. I will leave you to look at these other homework problems, but once again, I do want to note that if you have questions about the homework, to contact me, ask me. A lot of people have been asking me things, and it's been really helpful. It gives me some idea to what to talk about in these lectures. And also, I should note that sometimes, yes, the homework marks something, Canvas marks something incorrect that is actually correct. So I have to tell you that over the winter break, I had asked IT to migrate, that's the term, everything I made up on Sakai for medical terminology over to Canvas. And they were really wonderful and did that. And it was kind of a huge job because I had like over probably thousands of questions that they had to migrate. But when they migrated things, as happens with things like this, it wasn't perfect. And so there are some errors because Sakai and Canvas do things differently. So sometimes I haven't caught all the errors, I confess. So I've been going through every single question that I made and double check proofing or whatever, something before I publish it for you to work on. So sometimes I find errors after I published it. So I try to check those as soon as possible, but if something doesn't look right, or if you know something is totally right and it gets marked wrong, A, I will check your homework. I really do check every assignment, and I add the points back in, and B, you're always, of course, welcome to contact me. And that can sometimes help out your classmates too, and it helps me because, you know, helps me to make sure that I get all the kinks out of my homework assignments and quizzes and things. So when we teach this class again, as it will happen, hopefully that won't happen again. Okay, we're gonna look at these lecture notes, but we're gonna look at them not in that version. So looking at these wonderful lecture notes, if I can actually find them for you. Okay. Okay, so this lessons 3 and 4, I start with a note to remind everybody, you are breaking down these terms into syllables. If you go, there's no place to really look up this information on the web, I think. But if you go look up, for instance, the definition of a word, the word is broken down to show you how to pronounce it, but that's not, very rarely will that be the correct way to break it down into the root word. So I don't recommend going by that sometimes. I think some of you, you know, may have been thinking that that's how to break down the words, which is totally understandable, but that's not what we're doing here. We're trying to break down these words to figure out what Greek and Latin later words they come from. So I tried, first of all, these notes just to explain to you a little why in the world some of the things happen with these word breakdowns. I really do I try not to overdo these explanations, though I'm sure I overdo them, because sometimes I have a feeling some of these rules that I'm throwing at you might seem a little arbitrary. That's probably in part because they are to you as an English speaker, and Greek is just a really, really different language. It is really a very, very complicated language. It requires years of study. I've been studying Greek and Latin since I was 13 years old. That means I've been doing them for over 30 years, which can give you a wonderful idea of my age. And well, it takes a lot of effort to learn them. And so what I'm trying to do here is just to tell you just enough so you can understand why you might be doing something. I would say that one of the most confusing things that you've probably encountered so far is what to do when you have, for instance, a base like aste or cardi that ends in a vowel, followed by a suffix that ends in a vowel. What do I do? One of the reasons for all this combining of certain kinds of vowels with certain kinds of vowels, but not every vowel with every vowel, is because Greek language loves something called euphony. That means, something that sounds good. Ancient Greeks disliked what's called hiatus. That means having two vowel sounds from certain vowels in adjoining syllables. So when you have two vowel sounds together like or no, you don't do that in ancient Greek. You have to elide them, which means you combine the vowels. You don't say uda ace, which actually means no one. No one's here. You take that final E of uda, no, and combine it or elide it into the A in ace. So you get udes, which means no one. Or if you have a word like me epaidusan, which means they taught me, this is me in Greek, me epaidusan, and hiatus. No, can't have that in Greek. So you elide them by taking out the E in me and basically almost making it like part of epaidusan. That is a Greek verb. Me epaidusan, in other words, is how the Greeks were to pronounce me epaidusan. What does this mean for us? What it means for us is, for instance, in the word periosteum. Okay, well, it's formed from these three elements: prefix, base, suffix. This is what it can look out like when you're breaking it down. And that's the word. So in other words, the E at the end of aste gets combined into the E in eum. The same thing happens with a word like brachycardia. Brachycardia. So the I, as it were, of cardi drops out, gets combined into the suffix I. And no, it is not the suffix A. I'll explain that in a moment. Pericardia, the same thing happens. Allosteri. While the final E in steri actually gets combined into the Y here. And microbe, the word that we had in lesson 2, there's actually an I after bi, meaning life, that gets combined into the E for microbe. It is true that some vowels you see here are not elided, so we still have the I and the O here. So in other words, there's sort of basic rules in ancient Greek that make sense when you study ancient Greek, but seem again kind of arbitrary when you haven't. So how do you know an elision occurs? Well, these are two rules that I came up with that hopefully will help you. When a base ending in I is followed by a suffix starting with I, the I's are elided. So epicranium becomes that. When a base ending in E is followed by a suffix starting with E, the E's are elided, as in periosteum, but notice not in osteitis. These vowels stay the same. Generally, when the vowels are the same, you get rid of one of the vowels. When they are different, you often can keep them, but not always. So, but go with this rule. And also we'll note that, yes, there are some bases like cardi, cole, kisti that the book lists like this. So in other words, when you see the I in parentheses behind a base, it means that sometimes the vowel disappears and sometimes it doesn't. So you can have words like kistoma or cystoma and cystography, but cystiform or cystotomy when it keeps the I. When a base ending in I is followed by a suffix starting with I, you can actually provide any of these three breakdowns as your answer. They're all correct, and I'm trying to reprogram Canvas so they will recognize them as correct, but that's why I have to individually check everybody's homework. It does mean that when you turn your homework in earlier, I actually have more time to check it. But mesocardia, these are all correct. So just know that there is some variation to this. As far as using the suffix I or a, I'm going to tell you, and this is completely based on reading Greek and studying all these terms, IA is a much more common suffix than the A. Generally, when a base ends in an I, you're going to have a suffix in IA. When a base ends in a consonant or often an E, the suffix will be an A. That's really general, though. I mean, notice that I have the words here, like usually and often. Greek is a language that has lots of rules and that seems to like to break lots of the rules. So something a Greek student learns. But IA is probably a little bit more common, I would say, as a suffix. So when you're looking for words to break down, just keep that in mind. You can look at this section here as far as identifying whether a word has a connecting vowel, that's an O, or a base starting with a vowel. Well, O is the most commonly used connecting vowel for medical terms based on Greek words. Generally, you're going to have a connecting vowel, as you do here, when the base that follows it starts with a consonant. So neurospasm, oncologist, biology, psychotic. So generally, in other words, yes, whenever you have a base or a suffix that starts with a consonant, you're going to be adding a connecting vowel. But when a base or a suffix starting with a vowel, okay, so a base like oste, which begins with a vowel, or a suffix like oma, meaning a tumor, or starts with a vowel, occurs in the middle of a term, it might seem that there is a connecting vowel, but there isn't. So endostoma, arteriostosis, hemiangioma, but allosteri. Okay, so this is actually a case of connecting vowel followed by a consonant, a base starting with a consonant, whereas here we actually have the bases or a suffix that begins with an O. And again, the best thing to do is really to look up the term in a medical dictionary. So I made up a list for you here of bases that begin with vowels, suffixes that begin with vowels, and prefixes that end with vowels. As you've probably seen in the text, as you notice in the textbook, some of these prefixes have more than one form, like ecto, endo, and exo, where you actually take out the O, or hippo, or apo. Some of them you don't actually check out the O, like pro and mono and hetero. Mono and hetero, I want to tell you, are kind of weird examples. The book includes them as prefixes, so I have to go by the book. But in a lot of ways, they're really more like bases. They're actually more like they're actually adjectives in ancient Greek. So if you did see a word with mono or hetero and mark this as a connecting vowel, that is actually okay. And the same with homo. But I kind of want to go by what the book does. Because the book is your reference guide. So for me to come up with all these other rules can be a little confusing. But this is a list that might be helpful. Now, when you're doing the word derivation exercises, this is one really helpful principle, I think, to keep in mind. Okay, so this is the idea. I mean, generally, a medical term is formed up of at least two different components, usually a base and a suffix, or a read the rule. The general principle for forming a medical term. The second unit of a word generally provides a basic idea. The first unit sort of adds some qualification to that idea. More than a few cases, the second unit of a term describes some sort of abnormal condition. Okay, so many of the terms that we're looking at mean something like a tumor, a hernia, an organ that's, pushing, drooping where it's not supposed to be. A condition regarding the blood, a weakening. The first unit tells us what organ or the location where that condition is happening. So you can look over this chart. For instance, in the word nephrotoxin, well, the main second unit, which is the main part of this word, is tox, and that tells us something poisonous is going on. The qualifying unit is neph. It tells us where something is happening to the kidneys. And then the in tells us that it's an agent or a substance. For the term cyanosis, cyan tells us that a blue or green discoloration is going on. Oc tells us where in the extremities of the fingers, and osis makes it clear this is an abnormal condition. Eubiotics, well, that tells us something about living well, or healthy and hygienic, as the book definition was. And then tix tells us that is a suffix that means the science of. So, so take a look at these words, and I've tried to break down how to do them. And I do allow for a certain amount of creativity in those in that section of the exercises. And this kind of question isn't actually on the midterm or the final. They are really meant to help you practice. And I mean, at some point I might change that, but for the moment, it's made a little bit more sense just to focus the midterm on the vocabulary and on the word analysis and the definitions, because those are the main parts of the class. But I think these exercises are very helpful for you to reinforce what you've been learning. Again, if you have questions, you are always welcome to ask me. On to lessons 3 and 4, finally and at last. Greek verbs used as bases. So what do we have going on here? Well, we have, in lessons 3 and 4, we are looking at using Greek verbs. All the bases we've learned up to now are nouns or adjectives. And one thing I can tell you about Greek verbs is that generally these bases have more than one form, and you should learn both. So this one that means sense or sensation is esthet or estes. I mean, they're not usually that different, but they're a little bit different, extra vowels. Or gen or gena, come into being, produce. So this one ends in a vowel. Or kine, kines, kinesi, the I, all means something about movement or motion, like kinetics or kinesiology, which I know some of you were majoring in or minoring in, which is great. Right, well, Greek verbs are known for being complicated, and actually in Greek you have to learn several different forms in order to conjugate them, in other words, to put them in different tenses and voices, active, passive, middle, present, future, past, and something called the aorist and pluperfect. Take Greek to find out. For instance, for the verb lua, which means to break down or destroy, you actually have to learn all these forms. Lu, loose, laluk, laluk, laluf. In order to write the word to write, you have to learn graph, grops, gegraph, gegrom, gegraph. You want to be able to say more than I write in Greek. So, if it seems that these bases are kind of confusing and have too many forms, that's because they do in Greek too. The other thing, lesson 4 introduces a new concept called compound suffix forms. So basically, a compound suffix form is a base added to a suffix, and this particular combination of bases and suffixes listed in lesson 4 is very commonly used, to the point that when you see them, you can, if you memorize the list of the compound suffix forms in lesson 4, you'll know what they mean. Also, you don't actually have to break them down because they're common. Like this one, pathy, meaning something is diseased. Well, you can either it's a disease of the heart, particular, you can just leave the compound suffix form as is, pathy, or you can break it down. It's actually formed from a base, path, and the suffix y. Or carcinogenic, something that is causing cancer. You can leave it as is, the genic here, or you can break it down into gen and ick. Ick pertaining to, gen meaning producing. Or cholangiography, something that records or measures, or is a bile and the blood vessels. You can either leave it as graphy, or you can break it down this way. Scopy, I will break that down. I'm gonna fix that on my handout. We'll go to another one. Gastropetosis. So petosis means a drooping. This is a drooping of the stomach. So you can either leave petosis as is, or you can break it down in p, that is actually a base, those two letters, or osis. And as I note here, so I'll give you the whole list. Also, for instance, rexis, this actually means a bursting of the fingernail. So you can break it down, leave it as is rexis, or break it down as rex plus cis. There's this S that actually gets swallowed up here. You don't need to worry about that, actually. I put that there for people who want to know every last detail of why these languages are like this. Or take some note of this compound suffix form, splenectosis. So ectosis is tasis is a compound suffix form meaning a dilation. Ta is actually a base that means to stretch. So you can either leave it as is, which is always easier to do, like this, or if you want to break it down into forms, it is ectosis, a condition of the spleen. Breaking these forms down can help you keep track, I think, of the suffixes and bases they contain. So that is all the fun that we're going to have this week. And let me know if you have any questions. And yes, I'm always really glad to hear from you. I look for that survey about the midterm and everything. And again, please do send me questions if you're working on the homework and you have a question. And yes, and I really, again, wanted to say, I really appreciate your efforts to use Canvas. I know it is a new system, and this is probably the first online class for many of you, and it has a lot of information in it. Much of it in a foreign language that you're supposed to use for the medical terms. So I really, again, do appreciate your patience. And if you're staring at that messy desk back there, it's actually my husband's desk. I know you can't see my desk because my computer's on it, but so my desk is slightly more organized, but he likes it that way, so I won't touch it. Anyways, he doesn't teach medical terminology. My husband teaches American Studies and Religion at Fordham University, and he is a 2-time Rutgers graduate. I want you to know he went to Rutgers for both his undergrad and grad degree, and he's very proud to say that he went there. So on that note, good luck with all your studies, and have a great week. Take care.